Hello and welcome back to Likely Suspects, page number 73. What's the date?
May 30th, 1936.
May 30th, 1936. And I understand there was a call for a little video of Lou Too, the lizard.
His real name is Baker.
His real name is Baker, but you can see him right there. If I can get the camera turned around.
Well, you could also flip the camera around if you weren't 85 years old.
That would be more trouble than it's worth. There he is, a likely suspect, sitting on his log, enjoying the warmth of his light. And now, we shall return to our story with chapter whatever.
Well, we don't know what
We don't know what chapter it
We
is.
just know it's likely
But it's
suspects.
called Likely
And
Suspects.
sometime we'll get him out and we'll let him come over and read with us. But he just ate, and so he kind of likes to be left alone. While
And here's our friend
Harper.
Harper.
She's another likely suspect. She's a real likely suspect. Oh, and here comes Betty.
Hello, Betty.
Betty is our other likely suspect.
Come here. You want to be in the video as well?
All right, come on.
There she is. And down.
Oh, and down she goes.
And down you go too.
Oh,
Adios.
bye, Harper. Okay.
Nope, back. Back.
I lay in bed the next morning feeling mightily burdened. Something had been gnawing at me all night. It was Gideon. Where did he fit into all this? How was he connected to this town, to these people? Manifest was the place he'd chosen to send me to, and yet it didn't seem like he'd ever even been here. Did he know Ned or Jinx? Did anyone know him? I wasn't even sure that I did. Now there was a thought. What did I know about Gideon? What did I think people should know about him? I started a list in my head. Highlight. He always walked like he knew where he was going. He was a better cook than Shady. He tucked the blanket up under my chin when he thought I was asleep. So you're going to highlight that part. These are things she knows about her daddy. Oh yeah, gotta have these. I stretched out in the warmth of my bed and pulled the blanket up to my chin. Let's see, I thought. Highlight. He was smart. Not so much book smart, even though he did know all 48 states and capitals and all the presidents from Washington to Roosevelt. So why are there only 48 states and capitals?
Because we didn't have Alaska and Hawaii until when, 1959?
Correct.
That means they're about 65 years old.
And he knew
The first president
he knew the first president, Washington, all the way to Roosevelt, because that's where they were at current day.
Roosevelt was president in 1936.
No, Gideon was more living by your wits smart. So highlight here, he had once turned a bunch of wildflowers into a $20 bill. Someone might have said that wasn't smart, that was magic, but not the way Gideon had done it. Have you ever seen the stuff, well, you don't have social media, but the stuff on social media where somebody takes like a paper clip and they keep trading up? Who'll trade me this paper clip for like a pencil, and then who'll trade me this pencil for like a book, and who'll trade me this book for, and it just keeps going up until like people have gotten like houses and cars.
That sounds like a sucker bet. Who'll trade me a house for this paperclip? I have a whole bunch of paper clips I'll give you for a house or a car.
So here's Gideon's early version of that. He gathered up a nice bunch of wildflowers and traded them for a sewing kit in Decatur. Then in Fort Wayne, swapped that sewing kit for a camera, which he raffled off at a church picnic in South Bend. Betty, stop. Chances were 25 cents a piece or 5 for $1. He ended up with $7.50 and bought us a tandem bicycle. But our behinds were so sore by Kalamazoo that he sold it for a $20 bill to a man with twin grandkids. I remembered all these things about Gideon, but I couldn't remember if he'd said the words or if I'd only imagined them. Those words, I'm coming back for you. Highlight. Memories were like sunshine. They warmed you up and left a pleasant glow, but you couldn't hold them. I'd have to do some divining of my own, I thought, as I rolled over. There was the Wiggle King fishing lure sitting on the windowsill where I'd left it the night before. I should have put it back in the cigar box, but somehow it had separated itself from the rest of the items. It had become different, special, and it needed a special place. There was a welcome breeze blowing through the open window. I was no stranger to hard work, but the thought of being cooped up in Miss Sadie's divining parlor left me feeling a bit short of breath. Maybe I could busy myself helping Shady and I wouldn't have to go. Now there was a plan. I'd saunter downstairs and make myself so useful that Shady couldn't possibly see fit to allow me to walk out the door, let alone do someone else's bidding. I figured Shady might be feeling a little down in the mouth that day. He'd held his church service the night before, followed by a potluck, but it turned out to be more of a down on your luck as only one person showed up. A fellow with a week-old beard and a hole in his hat brought a can of beans.
That's good eating.
So down in the mouth that day, he's a little discouraged.
Discouraged, down on your luck, doesn't have a job, hadn't shaved in a week. All he had was a can of beans for the potluck.
Right.
But he brought them.
Yeah, but it was Shady who was down in the mouth, not the guy that
because
showed
he
up.
didn't have a big crowd.
He didn't have a big crowd.
I'm with you.
I hopped out of bed, put on my overalls, and headed down the narrow wooden stairs. "Good morning, Shady," I said, ready to sit down to a plate of his usual warm, slightly burnt biscuits and molasses. Shady stashed something under the bar and mumbled words I didn't catch. When he looked up, I could see that his eyes were kind of bloodshot and his whiskers hadn't been shaved since the day before. The bottle on the shelf behind the bar was still full, but I supposed it was like any craving. If a person liked cookies, he was going to keep more than one at hand. When Shady went back to the stove for my breakfast, I leaned across the counter and peered behind it, but there was only a chipped coffee cup holding a couple of nickels and a button. Was it Shady's drink money? So she thinks that he must have a problem with alcohol. Okay. Alcohol was against the law then as much as it was in 1917. See?
Okay.
But folks could usually get a bottle of the stuff here or there. I didn't know if bootleggers would take buttons for payment along with nickels.
I think not.
I scooted back to my bar stool as Shady came in, presenting me with a plate of cold, more than slightly burnt biscuits and half a leathery pork chop. I knew that times were hard, so I didn't complain, but my stomach couldn't help its moaning and groaning. Hattie Mae had brought by some delicious fried chicken the day before, but that was a distant memory. I bit into a hard biscuit, hoping I had enough spit to soften it up. But just then, Shady brought me a cold glass of milk. I nearly drank it down in one gulp, and he poured me another glass. It filled my stomach nicely, but in my head I made plans to go by the newspaper office later to see if Miss Hattie Mae had any leftovers. I thought maybe you could use some help around here, I said to Shady, wiping off my milk mustache. I do laundry and mending. I'm even good with a hammer and nail. He scratched his whiskery face, making a sound like sandpaper on rough wood.
Well, that's awful nice of you to offer, but I'm feeling a little spent this morning and need a bit of a lie down. Besides, Miss Sadie will be expecting you,
he said. I choked a little on the biscuit brick, wondering how Shady knew of my ill-conceived agreement with the diviner. When he went over to a box in the corner of the room and pulled out a wire bristle brush, one glove, a half-full bag of chewing tobacco, and a cracked mirror. Then his eyes lit up and he said, "There you are." Oh, sorry.
There you are.
He pulled out a long coil of rope and proceeded to tie a large knot at each end. He gave the rope a good tug, testing its worth, and presented it to me.
Every little girl needs a skipping rope,
he said with a smile as he replaced the odds and ends and hauled the junk box out back. I held the rope in my hands and felt a stinging in my eyes. I didn't really think of myself as a little girl anymore, but I smiled. I had a skipping rope once, I said when he returned. It was in Tennessee, and I was using it to pull a wagon full of firewood. I guess I loaded too much wood in it because the rope broke in two. I've always wished I could do that over. I wouldn't have carried such a heavy load.
Seems to me you've been carrying a heavy load for some time.
Shady's eyes looked like deep, watery pools.
Besides, everyone deserves a do-over. Now you've got yours.
He smiled. So, highlight, seems to me you've been carrying a heavy load for some time. Do you think he's talking about firewood here?
No, I do not.
No, he means that she has been put in grown-up situations even as a little girl her whole life, and she's been having to help her daddy and all that kind of stuff. I smiled back, feeling the rough and bristly rope. It was like Shady. He had his rough edges, but he was strong and steady. I guessed I'd better fess up about the diviners since that cat was out of the bag anyway. About last night, I lost my compass again the other day and had to go see about getting it back.
Miss Sadie told me I take a little milk over to her on my way back from town a couple of times a week. Did you two have a nice visit?
If you mean, did she tell my fortune? No, she did not. She just carried on a bit, jingling and jangling, telling me an old story about a couple boys who lived here a long time ago. I kind of liked having the letters and mementos mostly to myself, so I decided to keep those a secret. But I broke her pot, and now I have to go back and work it off.
Shady perked up a bit.
Oh, sorry, I guess that was my part.
She told you about a couple of boys?
Yeah, and some trouble they got into with the clan with some poison ivy and such. Ned and Jinx. Did you know them? Shady occupied himself by scrubbing down the bar top.
Well, I did.
That gnawing feeling came back to me and I worked up my nerve. Shady,
Yes, Abilene.
do you think Gideon knew those two boys? Did he have many friends when he was here? Did he ever go fishing? Did he ever go fishing with anyone or swimming in the creek? My questions and my need to know came out in a rush.
Well, now,
Shady rubbed the back of his neck.
let me see. I'm sure your daddy did most things boys do, swim, fish, cause havoc.
He worked at a stubborn spot on the counter, but I caught him catching a glimpse of me.
Didn't he tell you much about when he was here?
Yes, he told me lots of things. He said there was a man who drove a cart around town and brought fresh milk to people's doorsteps, and ladies who'd walk down the streets in white gloves and fancy hats with big feathers sticking way up. But it's like he was telling me things you'd notice from the treehouse. Storefronts and activity, people going here and there, but only what you could see from a distance. Nothing up close. Why, I only heard about you a few weeks ago. Did he write to you at all? Shady paused and his shoulders looked heavy.
A postcard now and then. Sometimes when folks move on, it's hard to look back. It's not their fault. We know he wandered a bit after he left here, but then we got word that he had a little girl, and we knew he'd take good care of you.
I did warm a little at that, but I wasn't ready to be done grumbling. I stuck my chin on my fists. Well, Gideon's telling a manifest was nothing like Miss Sadie's. Her story was full of names and faces and who did what and where. I learned more about manifest in one sitting with her than from all of Gideon's stories put together. I grumped. But I still hadn't learned anything about Gideon. All you can see is the book. There, yeah. Shady looked up, and with the sun gleaming in through the stained glass, he looked like he was having a revelation.
Yeah, that Miss Sadie could sure weave a story. I bet she could fill in some of the missing pieces.
I don't know if Shady would have said more, but he looked relieved to hear a jingle at the door. Letty and Ruth Ann poked their heads in. "Hey, Abilene." Then, remembering their manners, they added, "Good morning, Shady."
Good morning.
He answered.
Do you girls care for a glass of buttermilk? Oh, that's good stuff.
"Yes, please," Letty and Ruth Ann answered together. Shady went into the back room and Letty whispered, "First, we have to sell some eggs in town. Then we can work on the Rattler mystery. We've made a list of suspects. Mr. Cooper, the barber, Mr. Koski at the diner, Hattie Mae." "Hattie Mae?" I whispered back. "The nice newspaper lady? Surely you don't think she's the Rattler?" "Well, not really, but she's got a sweet tooth and she'll probably give us a licorice whip or some jelly beans if we stop by. But we'll start with Mr. DeVore, the postmaster." Mention of Hattie Mae made me think of something. Wait a minute. I need to run back upstairs. I went up and thumbed through the newspapers I'd selected from Hattie Mae's office. I found her column in both and gave each a quick look-see. It was the one from October 11th that rang a bell. I carefully tore it out and made a point to take another look through Hattie Mae's old newspapers later. As I went back downstairs, Shady was pouring the buttermilk. What are you
girls up to today?
We're doing some corporal works of mercy. Mr. DeVore needs visiting."
Oh, he does. Well, is he sick?
"Sick? Ruth Ann pondered the question. "I guess you could say that if you consider loneliness a sickness. Who wouldn't be? Spending all day sorting everybody's letters from dear ones far and near and never having a loving word sent your way." So this is their ruse for why they're going to visit him. Shady looked like he'd been given more answer than he'd asked for.
Well, you be sure to give him my regards. Tell him we missed him at last night's service, and we'd be pleased to have him come next week at the same time. And bring more than beans.
He reached behind the bar where he'd stashed something earlier and took out that something wrapped in a brown paper bag.
"Good day, girls,"
he said as he left. There was an awkward silence as I thought about what might be in that bag. Then Ruth Ann said, "Come on, Abilene, finish up and let's go." "Can't," I said before washing down the last of my biscuit with some buttermilk. "Why not?" asked Letty. I handed her the October 11th Hattie Mae's News Auxiliary. The paper was a little wet from my sweaty hand. I got a debt to work off. So off to Miss Sadie's she goes.